Strategy games are back. And yes, I'm using the term strategy games very loosely. Everything for me is a strategy game which has a top-down view and where you need basically a plan to manage whatever you are doing. Real-time strategy games, turn-based strategy games, management games, building games, they're all strategy games for me, right? And I know that some people would disagree, but that is what I'm using. And the good news is they're back. The bad news is 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. 15 years ago, we were starving for strategy games. We were lucky if we got one strategy game per year, and we had to pray that it was good and not a mobile game and not a browser game. So we were just desperate to get some unique and good strategy game, and the good news was that one publisher in particular said, you know what, we will give you exactly that. In-depth strategy games, which look a little bit better than glorified Excel sheets. And yes, there was Paradox. Paradox gave us the strategy games we really needed to just have at least something to play with, right? And yes, even back then, Paradox has always been seen a little bit like the company who is releasing a little bit too early. Some of the DLCs and patches were questionable. There were too many of them. This discussion is going on for decades now. But nonetheless, there was always a bare minimum they reached with the games, and you still enjoyed them for hundreds and hundreds of hours. Nowadays, you're looking at a lot of Paradox games, and you sometimes don't even know why they exist. Imperator Rome is probably one of the most prominent examples where I think not even the developers really knew what this game was about. And then we have a lot of follow-up games, which, yes, of course, do not have the content like the predecessors. But even if you're looking for some unique mechanics, you not often find them. And I think the biggest problem we then had was Cities Skylines 2, which came out by the end of the year, and that game was a complete disaster. And I'm not even talking about performance, I'm not even talking about bugs, I'm talking about gameplay elements which were not there or were not functioning as they should be. And people have been talking about this for months, have been telling the developers, have been telling the publisher, and nothing happened. Then we have the big screw up with the first DLC, and they have finally acknowledged that this cannot continue. They will now take the rest of 2024 to just fix the base game and will not release any new content. And that's great that they have finally heard the warning, but a little bit too late. The game is now out for over 6 months and it's still in a miserable state. The next game which was supposed to come out was Prison Architect 2, which was again supposed to come out in May, but has now been postponed into September. Keep in mind, the game was originally supposed to come out in February this year, so it has already been postponed. And don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining that they are postponing it. Please take all the time you need, because we do not need another Cities Skylines 2. I think everyone can agree on that. But it definitely shows that there's something happening with Paradox, and I hope it will be positive. Another game which is coming up, it's a little bit further away, but it is one of the big ones, is Europa Universalis 5. Paradox has been teasing it, they have been showing screenshots, they have been talking about gameplay elements, and they have been talking to the community from the start to hopefully gather some feedback. Because the reality is, when 5 is coming out, people will immediately compare it to 4, and the reality is they cannot compete in content. I mean, Europa Universalis 4 is now what? 12 years old and just got another expansion a week ago? They cannot compete in content here, but they have to compete with unique and interesting gameplay mechanics. And if they don't deliver that, this would be another game where people just ask, why? For some graphic improvements? I don't need that. Look, I have played your glorified Excel sheet games 15 years ago. That little bit of better graphics is not really persuading me to move on to the next game and give you money, right? So they have to figure that out. But things have also changed dramatically in the last 15 years. We have now more strategy gamers than ever. I see tons of people coming in on live streams, in videos, and just saying, holy moly, this is my first strategy game ever. I'm really interested in this genre, and what games can you tell me I should check out? What are the strategy games you want me to check out? And I sometimes hesitate to tell them, check out the Paradox games, because they are in a questionable state, right? And we have just so many more people coming in, and I think it's the worst time that you have to try to figure out where you want to go as a publisher / developer at a time where we never had that many players that we have right now. And there is another huge change and problem for Paradox in particular is there's now competition. We have more and more indie developers jumping into the strategy genre, and we have more publishers coming up. One of them is Hooded Horse. They have been releasing games for 2 or 3 years now as a publisher, and they are also completely focusing on strategy games. And they just released one of their biggest games, the biggest game actually, and one of the biggest Steam games ever with Mana Lords. Yeah, that's from them. Well, as a publisher, as I said. The next game, which is has been unfortunately postponed into July, but is coming out soon, is Norfolk. If you have not heard about it, it's RimWorld in a medieval fantasy setting with Crusader kings on top of it. And it's already pretty fantastic from what I have played. So this could be another banger. And they have so many more games coming up. But they are not the only publisher. There's also Code Games, which is publishing Galacticare, which if you love management games and you love 2 Point Hospital and all that, you should definitely keep an eye out for that game. But that is coming up soon. And so we have more publishers coming into this genre, even more developers, and Paradox is not alone anymore. Back in the day, we didn't have a choice. Paradox was our sole choice when it came to strategy games most of the time. But now, we have choices. And we are more players than ever. And that's great for the genre. That's great for us gamers. But for Paradox, that means they have to get their shit together. And they have to figure stuff out quickly. Because if they don't, they might become the next Electronic Arts / Ubisoft in the strategy genre. And I think nobody really wants that. So I'm hoping they're figuring it out as quickly as possible. With that said, let me know what you think about the whole Paradox situation and that strategy games are finally back. I mean, I think everyone is happy about that down below in the comments. And also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like. And if you want to see more strategy video games, that's what we are completely focusing here on the Mole Under Management channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. With that said, thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I hope I see you next time.